So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Madison DX Club presentation. We're very fortunate to have Hal Turley with us tonight, the W8 Hotel Charlie. Now, if you're a DXer, you've worked Hal probably many times because as the title to his presentation shows you, he's been all over the world. So no doubt you contacted him. Most recently, he was down at Juan Fernandez at CB0ZA, which really was a fantastic operation. And I was happy to pick him up on 6 meters. So that was great. And I know he's already got something else planned. I think he's headed down to St. Martin soon. For anybody who needs St. Martin on 6 meters, they're going to be down there on the French side on 6 meters, and they're going the last week in June, which is really, in my experience, one of the hottest weeks of the year for sporadic E. So that'd be really a great chance to operate them. But there's something else he's very much involved in regarding DX, and that is Hal's the Secretary Treasurer of INDEXA, the International DX Association. And perhaps, Hal, you can tell us a few things about the challenges and importance of funding of these DXpeditions. So whenever you're ready, Hal, please go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I guess pull up my PowerPoint. I don't know what else I'll need to do here. Put it in the presentation mode. And I assume that you will be able to see this, or do I need to share my, am I going to need to share my screen?
Yeah, you need to share your screen first.
Okay, let's go back here then. You would think, as many times as I've done this, so share screen. I'm going to do here, and it should be sharing. Is it sharing?
Yes.
Whoop, I hit the wrong button.
Well, it looks good.
Okay, good. All right.
Perfect.
All right. Well, let me just start out by saying how much I appreciate this opportunity. I can remember whether it was this presentation or whether it was for another group where Bob had gotten in touch with me and about a year or so ago, and I had an incident on the Svalbard DXpedition, which I'll cover in a bit. So anyway, regardless, I'm happy to be here, and just certainly appreciate the opportunity to speak to this distinguished group of DXers. I was given a 40-acre field in which to roam as far as my subject, and Bob had kind of laid out, well, I think, you know, DXpeditions from the Arctic to the Dead Sea would be a good topic. And then he went so far as to include several of the DX activities that I've been involved with over the last several years. And so what I wanted to do, and you know, not to insult anybody's intelligence, many of these places that I've been, there are presentations out there on YouTube and on social media. Perhaps you've seen some of them. I've given presentations, but from the standpoint of a DXer such as myself, and as somebody that goes on DXpeditions, I'm frequently asked, you know, how do I get to do this? I would like to someday do this. You know, what do I need to do? So with watching this presentation through that lens, you know, perhaps some of you, and I know some of you are DXpeditioners, have gone on DXpeditions, but if you've ever had an inkling to do that, you know, I'm going to pass along some things that that might be beneficial. And then, of course, you know, the fact that you all record this might be a good resource for somebody else that's interested. So again, I appreciate the opportunity. Now, in the little subscript, Bob included that I had operated, was a team member of the E-51D North Cook and the VP-6A DXpeditions last year. So I do want to go on record as stating that I was a participant in those. That was a RIB, a remote operation. Both of those were remote operations by George, AA7 JV. And I've been involved with the RIB project with George Wallner and Greg, W6IZT, and Mike, KN4EEI, through the COVID years, and have worked with them on some of those operations from down in C6AGU. So, I was a participant in both of those DXpeditions, which were very successful. It was really the first full-blown DXpedition deployment of George's radios in a box, which is a project that's being done in conjunction with the Northern California DX Foundation. So perhaps some of you have worked some of these radio in a box DXpeditions. As Lloyd reviewed there, just came back a couple weeks ago from the CB0ZA DXpedition. It exceeded all of my expectations. Your question? Okay. It exceeded all my expectations and the team as well, our 7-member team, as a tribute to Marco, CE1 Echo Whiskey, who was the original kind of the mind behind trying to pull this off, and unfortunately became a silent key in November. We operated 3 different call signs from there. CB0ZA operated from up on top on the hilltop that was shown earlier at about 1,000 feet. And the other station that we had up there was mentioned was a 6-meter, and Mike, AB5 Echo Bravo, operated EME using the 6M8 GJ antenna system. And I'm not sure how many actual 6-meter EME contacts. I'm thinking about 60 is what he ended up with. He's made a special QSL card that's he indicated he's going to send all the EME operators. But in addition to that, Mike and I, we were on 2 different shifts. We did 24-hour shifts up there, and I was on the opposite shift. And there were some remarkable evening and nighttime conditions where I had some really good openings to North America, to Europe, to JA, and we made a lot of folks happy. I think we ended up with over 1,000 6-meter contacts. Down at the down below on the Fort Santa Barbara, we had access to a house there. There was a gentleman who was a ham. His name was Jose, and his call, I think, was CE3 Charlie Alpha Delta, I believe was his call sign. Anyway, his license is expired, but he was very familiar with amateur radio. He opened up his house. He's very interested in getting back into amateur radio, and we had access to something that I'll show you here in just a minute. But we operated 2 stations from down there using one of the spider beams. This was also the call sign that was used during the ARLCW contest, and we'll talk briefly about that. In addition, there was a 3rd call sign, and some of you may have worked Charlie Bravo 0 Zulu Echo Whiskey. I took Greg Marco's, he calls it the Next Gen RIB. It's a smaller version of George's RIB, just running 100 watts from a K3. It's based around a K3. We had 30 operators from around the world who would log into this and operated around the clock and made over 15,000 contacts as CB0 Zulu Echo Whiskey using the remote radio from up on top with a homebrewed vertical. Now, you'll be seeing more about this DXpedition, but I did want to introduce you to these 2 young men who I just absolutely was fascinated by. To have young guys on a DXpedition, Easy, HI3R slash, he lives down in Florida, NK4DX. And then Dursel Williams, he goes by Willie, X-Ray Quebec 3 Sierra Kilo. And Willie was actually the only Chilean on board the team. But these guys were like the Energizer bunnies on speed. They never stopped. I don't know when they slept, but they did a lot of really amazing stuff down there. And if you look in the background there at the Fort San Juan Bautista, you see the tower in the background. Can you see that okay? So the gentleman told us about the tower that was available there, and he said, you guys might figure out some way to utilize that tower. And so Easy was, he went crazy. He said, we're going to use this. And we had a tuner. We were able to base load this tower, and it had about 60 or 70 radios, ground radio system. It's an aeronautical tower, and we utilized this tower on 160 through 10 meters as one of our stations, Charlie Bravo Zero Zulu Whiskey. And again, you'll be hearing more about this in the presentations in the coming weeks. One of the other projects that these guys did, there's 3 transmitters, repeaters up on top of this rock. Serra Alta, I believe, is the name of it. I can't see but they went with some of the lady who was the park manager, other government officials, and they hiked 3.5 hours to get to the top of that mountain and access the repeaters. They repaired 2 of the 3 and diagnosed the 3rd one, which was a military repeater. And the parts have been ordered, and the military will be helicoptering a technical crew in there to make the repairs there. But anyway, this was such a fantastic thing that these guys were able to do as an added service, and it really brought to light some of the good things that amateur radio can bring to some of these locations, just the technical skills that we have and so forth. So again, you'll be hearing more about some of that, or reading more about some of the other things that were done there. So again, the question, how do you get to go on a DXpedition? I was at a Hamfest, the Charleston Hamfest Saturday, and had a guy came up to me and he said, "Look, I'm getting ready to retire. I know you do this. I'd like to do this." And of course, my first question, anytime anybody asks me this, how serious are you as a DXer? If you're a serious DXer, there's a good possibility that you truly have an interest and would be a good candidate to go on a DXpedition. For me, my DX journey started, I was interested in DX when I was a young man. I was first licensed when I was 15 years old in 1967. This is the only photo of me with my novice call. Me and my 2 brothers shared a 10 foot by 10 foot bedroom. Being the oldest, I was able to take the closet from my 2 younger brothers and turn that closet into my Radio Shack. I would eventually upgrade and get my extra class and so forth. And in 2004, I finally changed my call sign to W8HC. But when I was young, when I was in the 9th grade, I had to write a research paper for my English class, and the teacher said it could be a biographical research paper. So I wrote about Marconi. I was fascinated. This guy was the father of radio, and so I wanted to learn about Marconi and who he was. And of course, he's my QSL card. He's been my QSL card cover for years. So from 1967 through the 70s and up into even the 80s, I've gone to college. I'm raising a family. I don't have a whole lot of time for radio, as most of you probably experienced. In July, I had 20 DXCC entities confirmed. And this was about the time that I was bitten by the bug. And by May 24th, I had achieved I was #1 honor roll. So, I blew through all that. And, my interests were still in working DX and probably will be till they throw that first shovel of dirt in my face. up the hill here at Cunningham Memorial. But you know, I started out again, probably like you guys, shortwave listening, sending off for QSL cards. I would, you know, pay like 15 cents for an international reply coupon. And this was the first QSL card that I got from Radio Sofia, Bulgaria, and in 1965. Going to field day was a big treat for me, sitting and watching K8YBU running and just marveling how he was able to work stations and hear these call signs on phone. Just absolutely, you know, I want to do this. I want to be like Ross Kirk. I want to do that someday. And you know, never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that I would be able to do that. And of course, getting my hands on a CQ or QST magazine, reading DX stories in the late 80s and early 90s, going to Dayton was a big deal for me. And, you know, taking pictures, talking to the DXpeditioners, the Bob Offens, of the Marty Lanes, you know, guys that, you know, all of us have chased over the years on from DXpeditions all over the world. And so it was a big deal for me. And then of course had a lot of fun doing DX contesting and enjoying the pileups in that. Probably one of the, you know, my biggest Elmers, and you know, some people love to hate this man, was Al Hicks, Whiskey 8 Alpha Hotel. And Al and I had a very good relationship. He's been a silent key now for over 20 years, I believe. And our local club, the West Virginia DX Association, did get his call sign. So if you ever hear W8AH on the airwaves, it's one of the guys in our club. So my first trip abroad was in August of 2002. My wife and I flew into Shannon, Ireland, and did a 1,600-mile journey basically around the coast of Ireland. And one of the stops when we ended up, this was about a 2-week trip up in County Antrim, up in north, up in Gulf India, and went to a place called Ballycastle. We went to actually see Giant's Causeway. If you've ever been to Ireland and Northern Ireland, Giant's Causeway is a popular spot to check out. But a friend of mine here in Charleston loaned me an AEA 10-meter handheld. He said, "Why don't you take this with you, and maybe you can make a few contacts while you're there?" Which I took it, and I you know, would pull it out every now and then and call CQ or listen to see if I heard anything. And this was up there at Ballycastle, and of course I wasn't having any luck. I was hoping maybe I'd work somebody from Scotland. You can look across and see Scotland there. But there in the harbor, I saw this big stone and a memorial there, a little marker. It was a historical marker talking about some communications with Marconi and his assistant, George Kemp, and talking about Rathlin. I wasn't sure. I didn't know what any of this stuff was till I got back home and did a little bit of research. This was in 1898 when this supposedly happened. And my wife took a few pictures, and in that upper left picture, well, actually, and I guess in the 3 of the pictures there, you can see an island over there. Well, I would later learn that that's Rathlin Island, and so I'm trying to call CQ and no luck. Also, when I was in town there, I saw a sign about a Marconi festival that I had just missed. I think it had been like 10 days prior, and so that kind of piqued my curiosity, and I was going to research that when I got back home. We drove down to Galway, and then did a drive out towards Clifton, Ireland, to see Calmore Abbey. And I was very close to Clifton. I would learn something about Clifton when I got back home too, and did some more research. But I had arranged to go down to Loop Head. This coincided with the International Lighthouse Weekend, and I saw where a group of the Irish guys were going to be operating from Echo India 7, Lima Hotel Lima, Loop Head Lighthouse. And we drove down there, and I hooked up with these guys, and they let me operate with them for a couple hours, and got to meet some of the Irish counterpart amateurs. A couple of them that I got to meet a couple other times when I went back over there, but just super that they let me come in and be a part of their little lighthouse operation, which I found fascinating. And I said, oh, guys, before I leave, I've got this 10-meter handheld. Do you mind if I make a contact with you, with the lighthouse? So this was my lone Echo India stroke KC8FS. That was my call sign at the time. So I made a little QSL card. That was my lone QSL card. So now let's move to the next year. My wife and I had planned to go to Israel. We were going to do a self-guided tour. I wanted to coordinate it around the CQ Worldwide. I contacted the IARC president, Joe Obsfeld, and told him that I was going to be coming over, asked him if it'd be possible to access a station over there that I'd like to spend some time operating during the CQ Worldwide. And I said, oh, by the way, I'm the ARRL section manager for West Virginia, and I'm also the DXCC card checker. And if any of the DXers over here, need their cards checked, I'll be more than happy to do that while I'm over here. Well, he turned me on to some guys in the IARC. And when we arrived over there, they had a little reception for me. Some of the call signs you may recognize, pretty active DXers. And so after all was said and done, I had checked 1,860 QSOs for 7 of the Israeli DXers, including a 7-band DXCC for one of the guys. And it took me over a week to do this in the evenings and in my spare time. But I was going to it was going to kind of be payback for them giving me access to a station over there during the contest, because when we were in Jerusalem, we arrived there on a Friday evening just before Shabbat. Our guide took me to a place located between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, and basically dropped me off. He connected me with my contact there. His name is Slava, 4 Zulu 5 Mike uniform, who's a very active DXer. And the location for this operation was the club station. It's 4 X-ray 6 radio echo Mike. It's in a bunker. It's actually operated from a bunker in this community there in Reut, Israel. And it's the first time I'd ever experienced anything like this. It was kind of frightening in a way. You have to put the time frame in perspective here. It's 2003. The second intifada is going on there in Israel, and there's a lot of tension. So here I am in a bunker, with 3-foot concrete walls, and I'm operating radio by myself through the night, and operated for actually 17 hours, paper logging, and using the tri-band beam. I only operated 3 bands, 20, 15, and 10. In 17 hours, I had 1,221 valid contacts, and my best rate was 172. From this point, I understood what it's like to be on the DX side and to work a pile up. Even these aren't great numbers, but I'm running 100 watts and working and enjoying myself to no end. And so the QSL card from that operation is the upper left. Again, I was there only 17 hours. I decided I would go back the next year. A friend of mine, Dave, W8HC, and I went over. We did the full contest with a couple of other Israeli hams from the bunker. Again, in 2005, did a contest. In 2006, I had access to a school, a mikveh school, an agricultural school south of Tel Aviv. And we had a club station. There was about 7 or 8 of us that operated, and we scored really, really well in that contest. The last CQ Worldwide contest is operated from Masada, and they gave me the call sign 4 X-ray 0 Charlie. And this was such a treat for me. For those of you that, if you know anything about Israeli history and the Jewish history, Masada, the fortress of Masada, built by King Herod, is very significant. It was the kind of the last stand. This was like the Alamo of the Jews following the Roman decimation of Jerusalem. And so this is overlooking the Dead Sea, which the Dead Sea is about 300 and I think 311 or so meters below sea level. So it's 900 feet below sea level. But this site here at Masada is about 50 feet above sea level. So you're basically 50 or 60 feet above sea level, looking down below sea level there. So that's operating from the Dead Sea. But I would actually operate from the Dead Sea several times on my tours. You see, I think maybe the second time that we did our tour and we went to the Masada, I was getting ready to board the cable car, the tram, to go up to the top, and I was wearing a ball cap, and it had my call sign. And this gentleman beside me there in the photo comes up to me and asks me, he says, "Are you a ham?" I said, "Yes, I am." He says, "I'm Ruben, 4 Zulu 5 Fox India." He was originally from Argentina, was LU8HFI. He's the manager. He was the maintenance manager and still is the maintenance manager of the Masada National Park there in Israel. He said, "Anytime you want to come back," he said, you let me know. And I said, "Well, I bring my radio, my portable system over here." And so it's through Ruben that we were able to do the CQ Worldwide. And then every year during the tour, I would operate for a couple hours while everybody else was seeing the sights. And this is the little radio setup that I would take. I have an IC706, I had a little switching power supply, a tuner, and a homebrew vertical, and using a whip and some elevated radials. And this is what I would take. And I'm literally all over Israel. I would set up in the evenings or at night. I operated from the Dead, the Med, and the Red. That's the Dead Sea, the Mediterranean, and the Red Sea down at Eilat, and would just casually operate and basically mostly operate CW. And then, of course, also operated several times from the Sea of Galilee as well. We would stay at the Sea of Galilee. My last visit to the Holy Land, to my friends in Israel, was I was invited by the Holy Land DX group to come and take part in I guess it's their equivalent of the Parks on the Air, since Masada is a national park. They had a Masada activity one weekend in January 2019, and it was just a wonderful time. Flew over and spent a week with several of these guys. I introduced them to Tito's American vodka, which they absolutely love the Tito's, and so they want me to come back and bring some Tito's. All right, so now we're gonna switch gears again. We're gonna go back to Ireland, and so I went back after I did my homework. So I got to go back and see some more of Ireland and see these Marconi sites that I missed. I realized that Marconi, and if any of you have studied Marconi and the history of his company, you know that his mother was Irish. In fact, her name is Jameson, Annie Jameson, of the Jameson whiskey family, and it was because of his mother and because of her family and their fortune, Marconi was able to do what he did. And build an empire, a commercial empire, that was based around this new technology at the turn of the 20th century. And so there were some places that I wanted to see on this next trip. I'd contacted the treasurer of the Irish Radio Transmitter Society, Brendan DeHora, EI3 Golf Victor, and told him I was coming over again. Let him know that I'm a DXCC card checker. And that I'm willing to check cards or some places I want to see. I contacted some guys in the Galway club and told them that I wanted to visit the Marconi site out at Clifton that I'd missed the time before. And so this is some photos of the Clifton site. This was a huge operation. This was the European side of Marconi, the communication commercial station between Europe and North America. The counterpart was at Glace Bay, Nova Scotia. With the big building there in the center is the condenser house, and you can see the vertical antenna array that he had. If you ever have an interest in knowing what was actually there, it's worth researching. It's just an incredible operation that he built there and his staff. But one of the most amazing feats is this condenser house. So 350 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 33 feet high. It had 1,800 galvanized steel sheets, 30 feet by 12 feet. They were suspended from the roof by porcelain rod insulators. This was a capacitor. This was one giant capacitor that was used for the spark gap in the transmitter. Up above the valley there, where the station is located, there's this historical marker, and it designates that down in that area where the bog where the station was, called Derry Gimla Bog, is the site of the landing. Now there's it's pretty good looking landing, a 3-point landing, not. But the first transatlantic crossing by an airplane, first nonstop transatlantic by Alcock and Brown, and they crash landed right next to the station, the Marconi station. And if you look out into that field from up where that the tail wing marker is, you see like a dome out there. And so Kieran and Damien took me out there. I mean, it's like you're going out a goat path, and they had to get out of the vehicle, open a gate, and I'm thinking, we're going to get shot. We're trespassing. There's an old marker there. There was a marker there, weathered, and nobody really seemed to care that much about what was there. Although all that has changed in the last few years. They've taken a liking to what the historical value of this. Anyway, so we spent some time just walking around looking at some of the remains out there. And Marconi had the first order of business was to build a small gauge railroad from Clifton out to this site. And it was selected. One of the main reasons it was selected, not only because it was on the west coast of Ireland, but because it was in a peat bog. And peat is a fuel source in Ireland, and so there's remnants this day of the peat trenches that were dug up and used in the boilers to fire to fuel the boilers for the generators that were used there at the site. There's a plaque out there, there's commemorating that, and all you see basically are bases of the towers, and they're quite huge. I mean, you can imagine how much labor was involved to construct this station, and some of the concrete structures for the guy systems, and they came in and just cut these down. Now, this whole station was destroyed in 1922 when the Irish Republic rebellion occurred, and they actually destroyed the station. But I think by that time, technology had changed a little bit, and it was doomed anyway. So, just to give you some idea of some of the archaeological remains there, I found it fascinating. And so was a few facts about Clifton. The truth of the matter is that Marconi, he bet everything on the success of this, and it was a gamble that paid off for him. It was the first fixed point-to-point transatlantic commercial station built, and it was capable of 300 kilowatts of power. So there's reports and commentary from when that station was in operation that you could stand up on the hill and you could see blue flashes, from that condenser house at night. They used a full duplex arrangement. They were receiving on a different frequency. It was the first use of what they called the magnetic detector on the receive. and the first commercial use of spark gap. At its peak, there were 800 people employed at that site, and one of which was a telegraph operator named Jack Phillips, who was one of the two telegraph operators on board the Titanic when it sunk. So Jack Phillips worked there at that time. Interestingly, they operated this. You talk about low band stuff. They're transmitting at 54 kilohertz, or the 5,500 meter band. So when these guys took me out there, I did have a radio. They let me operate for a little bit. I made a few QSOs, voice QSOs. They sat there on a rock and said, this is just one of the most wonderful days. He said, I think this was August. He said, we don't get too many days like this, even in August. They were soaking up the sun. I also went down to Fastnet Lighthouse. I got permission to operate from, it was an International Lighthouse weekend, and went down to Mizzen Head, which is off the coast from Fastnet Lighthouse. And they were very, very kind to let me operate. This was also a Marconi station at one time. In fact, this light station, this is the last point that the Titanic would have seen, the last little jut of land that the Titanic would have seen on their way on their passage to North America. This was my little station set up. They put me behind a display, and it was a Marconi display. Talked about his activities there in Cookhaven, and I set up on a radio there. This was the radio that came out of the loop head, or the Fastnet Lighthouse. These are the stations that I worked, mostly European stations. And if you notice, the logo on this transmitter is it was a Marconi Marine Commandant SD. All right, as if that wasn't enough, I would go back to Ireland again in 2007, and I had found out more about the Marconi guys up in Ballycastle. Told them that I wanted to come over. They invited me to come over. This was the anniversary of the getting ready for the 100-year test that Marconi did out to Rathlin Island. And so I participated with the Marconi Group's festival there, and they took me across in a ferry, and they made all the arrangements, and we went over to Rathlin Island to the East Lighthouse. And Jack Doyle he owns a taxi company. So we loaded his taxi onto the ferry, went across, and I operated for about, I don't know, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours. But we had a prearranged schedule with Ted Butler, GI0JQQ, to simulate the testing between Kemp and the assistant over on the island. And so we did a CW contact to commemorate that. So it was a special event activity that I was really proud to be a part of. And then went back out to Clifton again. I wanted to take another look at that. And there had been a big to-do out there just a few months prior, where Marconi's daughter had done a dedication out there. They had on-air activity, sending signals on a special event station. And I worked Tom Frawley, EI3ER, and have the QSL card and another little special thing that Tom sent me. And of course, while I was there, I had to make a few contacts. During this time, I'm going to Friedrichshafen. I've been to a couple visits to Friedrichshafen. If you've never had an opportunity to go to Friedrichshafen, it's really it's unique. It's just a lovely area. And in 2012, I'd gone over. I met this gentleman, Joe Pater, W8HC, and his wife Janet. Joe's from Ohio. Some of you may know Joe. He's the 60-meter guy. He's big on 60 meters. But talking to Joe and me being from West Virginia, he's from Ohio. Yeah, I'll go to Dayton. and we're talking, and who do you know, and so forth. And he asked me, he said, "Hey, listen," he said, "if you ever had an opportunity to go on a DXpedition, would you consider it?" I said, "Yeah, sure, absolutely." So about 2 weeks later, I get an email from him, and he says, "How serious were you?" Well, next thing I know, I'm signed up. I'm a member of the NH8S Swain's DXpedition just later that year in September. And, I did this from the standpoint of, yeah, I want to try this. This is going to be a one-time deal for me. I'm going to go on a DXpedition and I'll try this one time. Well, guess what? Didn't quite work out that way. But the NH8S DXpedition was really quite a challenge for all the operators that were there. Super heat. You talk to the guys that were just there at W8S. They endured some of the same conditions. Extremely hot. There's Jerry WB9Z, who that was the first time I'd met Jerry, and we did really, really well. We had a wonderful, very successful DXpedition. About a week into it, I'm having a problem with my leg, and some of us are noticing we've been bitten by bugs. By the time I boarded the aircraft in Pango Pango to go back to Honolulu, I'm in trouble. And I had been taking some antibiotics, but I had an infection, a huge infection in my leg from a bite. My leg is swollen up, it's red, it's hot, it's inflamed. And I called my son, who's a nurse, and they arranged to meet me at the hospital in Charleston as soon as I landed. And they took me to the ER. I spent 4 days in the hospital. I was diagnosed with MRSA, and they had to they drained my leg, had to have my wounds packed. I took IV antibiotics for 4 days when I was in the hospital. I did recover from that, did real well, and decided I'm going to do another DXpedition. I was invited to be part of the K9W Wake Island, Wake Atolls, a commemorative DXpedition, wonderful DXpedition, great operators. Again, with WB9Z, K9CT, and TU, Joe Pater, K6 Mike. This was a memorial operation. And, one of the great side things, and for me, somebody that likes and enjoys history, I want to know where I'm going. I want to know about what's there. And this is one of the really neat things about this hobby is, at least for me, I don't want to just go there and operate. I want to know what was there, why it was there, and so forth. And in my research leading up to this, I found that of the 98 contractors that were executed, they were literally executed by the Japanese on the island, taken out on the beach, knelt down and shot in the back of the head. One of them was Frank Hasty, and I found that he was from Charleston, West Virginia. So I did some checking. I made some phone calls and found out his family still had family in Charleston. He was one of the 98. They sent me newspaper clippings. He was a young man. He was a hell of an athlete. He actually had a scholarship to, I think, Ohio State to play football. He was a heavyweight boxing champion in West Virginia. And, he left West Virginia to seek his fortune to go make money with this construction company that was doing work out on Wake Island. And so it was a privilege for me to get to know this gentleman on that DXpedition. June 2014, I retired. I spent almost 40 years in the chemical manufacturing industry. I retired from actually 2 different companies. The last company was Dow Chemical. I wasn't wealthy by any means, but I did have, means to do things that some people aren't able to do. And I'm truly blessed that I've been able to do these things. I think it was mentioned about subscribing to the weekly DX and the daily DX, which I have for years. There was a notification in July 2015. This Willis Island group was looking for one more operator. I immediately sent an email to Rob N7QT, who's gotten to be a very good close friend of mine. I got on board with the VK9WA Willis activation. and just a super DXpedition as far as I was concerned. January 2016, I was invited to be part of the Palmyra K5P DXpedition. You know, we were kind of led to believe that the conditions there were going to be a lot like the ones at Swain. So we weren't going to be out in tents. They had cabins for us that were kind of rustic, supposedly, and we'd be operating from a warehouse, an open air warehouse. But when we got there, we found that they actually had a lab for us. It was spacious. It was air conditioned, super lighting. Oh, and guess what? It had internet connection. We had high-speed internet access, and we're walking around just in total disbelief that we're going to be operating from this location in the lab. And so this was our station setup, and it looks something like you might expect to see at a modern multi-contest station that's been designed for like K3LR or W3LPL. So now we're going to go to 2018, and this was the Bouvet 3Y0Z, the day I'm leaving for Bouvet, and I had received an email from Ralph K0IR in the summer inviting me to participate with this. You know, talking to the family about it, I had this full support of my family, which is something that you have to have on something of this magnitude, and so had a wonderful experience with some guys, and we made some lasting friendships, even though we weren't successful with the mission, which was to get on Bouvet and operate. We were at Bouvet for 3 days. You all know the story, what happened, and we ended up actually having to leave and go to Cape Town, South Africa, rather than return back to Punta Arenas. And one of the really neat things for me was getting to meet Bob Hoffman, K4UEE. You know, this guy was a legend, and as most of you know by now, Bob became a silent key a few 2 months back, I guess it's been now, and it has just done so much for the hobby of hobby of amateur radio and DXpeditioning in particular. So it was a real treat to spend that much time with Bob, and unfortunate of his passing. VP6R was mentioned. Yeah, this was another one of these DXpeditions that was just exceeded all expectation. This was the next to the last time that the Braveheart was used. It's the only time I've been on the Braveheart. And you know, some point in time, somebody needs to write a book about the Braveheart and its contribution. Nigel Jolly and son and their crew, what their role in amateur radio DXpeditioning. So if anybody has a desire to be real gung-ho about doing something constructive. But Pitcairn is one of the most fascinating places I've ever seen. Absolutely beautiful in every regard. There's about 35 to 40 residents on there. One of them is Meralda, VP6 Mike Whiskey. I'm sure most of you have probably worked Meralda at some time or other. I saw her on 12 meters, I believe it was yesterday on FT8, and she's loving life. We made 2 attempts. We were successful in one, trying to get out to Kiska Island. We tried it in 2021, and how that came about. Greg W6IZT were together down in Georgia, and I get a phone call from Rob in 7QT. He said, "Would you be interested in going on an expedition to?" And he said Kiska Island. I said, "What is it?" "It's not a country." He says, "This is an IOTA expedition." I said, "Rob, I don't do IOTA expeditions. I've never been on an IOTA expedition." He says, "Read about it. You like history, read about Kiska Island," which I did. And as soon as I saw what happened there with the Japanese takeover of Kiska and Attu Islands in the Aleutians to start World War II, I decided I want to be a part of that. We were not successful in 2021, July 2021. We only made it as far as Adak Island, which is, if you see the arrow there, the 425 miles, you'll see that's as far as we got. There's flights that go into and out of Adak Island twice a week. We operated from Adak, and we made the best of a bad situation. But we did again in 2022, July 2022, NL8F and N3QQ and K08SCA Adrian and I decided we would do Kiska Island. And so I flew into Dutch Harbor. We had chartered a boat, the April Lonnie. Our boat captain is Captain Rick, who is actually quite an interesting character. If you've ever watched the show The Deadliest Catch, he was one of the featured boat captains in season 4 and season 5. And so he told us about his experiences with that. But he took us out to Kiska. We zodiaced on shore. We got to see a lot of the armaments. This is an unoccupied island. This is a tent and generator operation that we did for a little over a week. No open flame fires, so we cooked out of a pot of water and MREs and whatever else dry goods we had. So just an incredible location. A lot of birders go out there, but you'll see a mini sub. The Japanese had a mini sub base there, and then there's anti-aircraft guns all over the higher elevations. We took a Japanese flag and we sent it with some other trinkets to a school in Japan, and that's a different story for another day. But it was quite an interesting DXpedition, especially for somebody that likes history like myself. And then in September of 22, I had been contacted by Tom Harrell, N4XP. Tom's a longtime DX organizer, DXpedition organizer. He called me. He's been involved with the Dateline DX group. He said, we've got an opening. Would you like to go to Svalbard, which is up in the Arctic Circle? It is the northernmost full-time community on Earth at 78 degrees north. The city there is Longyearbyen. This is I would recommend this place if somebody's looking for a place to go. This is definitely a go-to place with the club station there, Juliet Whiskey 5 Echo, which we rented, their tower and antenna system, and just all the neat little things that town has to offer. It's a nice DX location. It was a privilege for me to be joined by Nathan, K4NHW. He's another young DXpeditioner and DXer, and it's great to see these guys. So here I am. This is what happened to me when I returned home. About a week in, or about 3 or 4 days into the DXpedition, I'm having trouble breathing. I'm fatigued. Greg and I are in Oslo, waiting on our flight home the next morning to Atlanta, and my iWatch goes off, telling me that I'm having atrial fibrillation. For those of you that don't have an iWatch, it's got a really handy little feature in there. My pulse is 130 beats per minute, and I'm distressed. I probably should have gone to a hospital. I called my son. He said, "Dad, you need to get home. My flight's leaving at 7 in the morning, son. I'll meet you at the hospital." I was in cardiac ICU for 10 days. They did 4 critical procedures on me, drained over 1 liter of fluid off my heart. Had to shock my heart back into rhythm. And anyway, I got a clean bill of health in December, believe it or not. I was good as new, and the doctors had absolutely no explanation as to why that happened. And so last year, and I'm going fast here, I did 2 expeditions. One to Ghana this was put together in 2 months. It was a result of a cancellation from some of my the Holy Land guys who were originally coordinating this, and we got some new DXpeditioners on board, and some of the guys may be on this call. W9AP, Bob, K9UR Joe, N2ZX. There was Mike, WB0NSD, and so it was a really a great experience. We coupled it with the WPX contest, phone contest, and did really well with that. And then N3QQ, KB2 FMH, and I went to Tutuila Island in American Samoa in August of last year. And so now I'm going to circle back. I'm looking at the time here. I'm going to wrap this up here shortly, so bear with me. So let's circle back to how do you get to go on a DXpedition? And once we get past the fact that, yeah, you're a DXer and you're interested, the obvious things are you're going to have some time available, and it's going to cost you money, depending on, obviously, on where you go, the transportation requirements. You can spend anywhere from $3,000 to $20,000. It just depends on what you want to do. One of the factors is how well do you work with others? I mean, it's a team thing on a DXpedition, and if you have a good teamwork mentality and take the eye out, you're a candidate in my book. Some of these DXpeditions require a little bit more physically and mentally. I still say that the DXpedition that we did to Kiska Island a couple years ago was probably one of the most physically demanding ones that I've personally done. And so you need to be in some kind of physical shape. You need to have a can-do attitude. Yes is the answer. Now, what's the question? And I've seen instances where people want to do things their own way and not the way the team wants to do it. They're not team players, and they're probably not going to get invited back to a DXpedition. Are you a +1? And by that means, okay, you're a good operator. You've got all the skill set, but what else do you do? Let's say you're an emergency room physician, or you're a web guru, or you're good at mountaineering, or you're certified scuba diver. You have something else that you bring to the table outside of amateur radio that might be a benefit to the DXpedition. I've been on DXpeditions where guys have said, I don't operate FT8, or I'm not a CW operator. I never did learn CW. Okay, you're limiting yourself by being one-dimensional or two-dimensional in your operating modes. Obviously, it pays to know people, have connections in the DX world. I won't lie about that. And along with that, you've got your usual politics. You need to have a sense of humor. You need to be able to laugh at yourself. And obviously, in my book, before you start thinking big about a DXpedition, I would suggest, as I've tried to convey in this presentation, think small. Think of a special event that you might get involved with, or create one. I've created my own special events. Go on a DXcation, or a staycation, as they call them. Take a radio, small radio setup, and operate for a while. See how you like that. POTA has been phenomenal. It's just done amazing things to stimulating activity on the air, and I know a lot of the POTA guys have really brought to the table some nice opportunities for people to get involved and enjoy the hobby. Lighthouse Weekend, you've got IOTAs, contests, and QSO parties. The bottom line is you want to build a resume as either a contester or a DXer, so you can show that you're you know, actively engaged in this aspect of the hobby. And then, as with this group, you know, actively support your local DX club or a DX organization. Attend the meetings and socialize. You know, get to know who's who. I like to think of it as being a Swiss Army knife. Be a Swiss Army knife. You know, it's not nothing. You know, you're not an expert on any one thing, but you're capable of doing many things with that tool in your pocket. So we mentioned that it was mentioned about the Indexa plug, and I'm glad that was brought up. You know, I am the Secretary Treasurer of Indexa. It's kind of a part-time, full-time job. And so I scratch my head and kick myself sometimes, like, why did I do this? But, you know, I enjoy doing it. It's an aspect of the hobby that, you know, I'm grateful I have this opportunity, and that, you know, the board of directors of Indexa and the membership of Indexa has enough faith and confidence in me to let me have that responsibility. And there's a lot of responsibility with the role. If you're not a member of Index, I would sincerely ask you to give it consideration. $20 annual membership dues, and you know, it supports DXpeditions to rare and semi-rare locations. The other plug I'm going to put in here is for DX Engineering. I'm sure some of you guys, or most of you guys, are familiar with DX Engineering and patronize DX Engineering for the many products. You know, Tim Duffy, K3LR, just an amazing guy. His support, I can't, it's almost embarrassing for me to think some of the support that he's given the DXpeditions that I've been involved in. I mean, we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of stuff for us to go on these DXpeditions. And, you know, we need to let him know we're grateful to him and DX Engineering for their support and all they've done for DXing and DXpeditioning. So with that, man, so that's a 1 hour presentation. That's actually about a 4 or 5 hour presentation done in 1 hour. And that's probably more than any of you ever wanted to know. But it's as you can tell, I enjoy doing this kind of stuff, and I know you guys enjoy, you know, working DX. If you have any questions about anything that I can answer, I'll be happy to do that. If you want to follow up with questions, if you want to email me questions, you know, my email address is on qrz.com. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions offline, anything at all that you might be interested in knowing about anything that I've done or anything in the expeditioning in general. So with that, I'll turn it back to Bob. Bob, thank you so much for having me, buddy.
Hal, that was wonderful. Yeah, really unique and interesting program. Thanks so much. That was great. I'm sure there's a few questions for you. So, Hal, where are you going next?
Well, I don't know if it was you that mentioned it. Going down to St. Martin, and you mentioned Fox Sierra. Greg, W6IZT, and I are going to go down. It's in the end of June, and we're making arrangements to also be on the Dutch side, to operate from the Dutch side. You know, I've gotten several emails since the announcement went out that hey, I need PJ7 on 6 meters, and I need PJ7 on 6 meters. So apparently there, you know, there has not been a lot of activity from the Dutch side, and what Greg and I are planning to do, you know, we've booked our place. We were there in I think either 2020 or 2021, and which is on the French side, and so it's up on a hill. It's a great location, and he has a friend over there that's Ham on that's on the Dutch side, and he's going to allow us to put up Greg's rib. So we're going to have the rib on the Dutch side, and our well, actually it'll be my K3 on the French side. So I'm taking a 5-element 6-meter Yagi, and then we'll have some vertical antennas. We'll also have a I guess it's a 2-element 6-meter loop, and so we'll be running the 5-element maybe 3 or 4 days on one side and 2 or 3 on the other side. And so that's where we're going next. There's a couple other projects that we're working on. Nothing's firmed up yet, but we're looking at some Pacific stuff. I'm sure you guys have read about the Jarvis DXpedition that's coming up with George, A7JV, and Don Greenbaum. They're going to be out there. They're going to be operating remote ribs. And George had contacted me. I will be one of the remote operators from the Jarvis DXpedition, which I think is in August, is tentatively when that's scheduled. But anyway, there's some exciting stuff coming up. I know there's some other things going on out in the Pacific. We just need to keep our fingers crossed that some of these rare entities will open up to us and let us in. You know what I mean?
So, Hal, I would be interested to know, being an officer at Indexa, what are some of the elements that go into deciding what expeditions you fund?
Okay, so if you go to our website, indexa.org, there's an online application that you fill out. There's about maybe 15 questions that are filled out. First and foremost is, we're looking if it is a top 60 entity on the Club Log's most wanted list. If it's in the top 60, we're going to give it consideration. If it's 61 through 100, we have a discretionary fund. We've created a discretionary fund a few years back, and we will give some money to those that fall in the 61 to 100 category. But the main thing we're looking at is the rare ones up to 60, and looking at the different facets associated with what's the budget, how many are going, the transportation requirements. This day and age, the big ticket item to get to island such and such is the transportation. All the funding that's done is based on the point of debarkation from the last place to the DXpedition. In other words, for my trip down to Juan Fernandez, I had to foot the bill myself, and the other guys did to get to Santiago. And when we went to the Bouvet trip, we had to pay our own airfare down to Punta Arenas, Chile, and that's the standard. And so, we're looking at the actual costs incurred to get to the last step of the DXpedition, and we give consideration to that. And the other aspect, the other grant opportunity that we have is the humanitarian aid grant. It's little used, unfortunately. We're trying to encourage DXpeditions to look at ways that they could apply for grants for humanitarian aid to these locations. There's opportunities to provide medicine or school supplies or books or what have you. And we've had some grants. This was a grant that was set up from Zorro, JH1HT, I believe it's called, who's now a silent key. He donated a substantial amount of money to Indexa specifically for this humanitarian grant. And so, there's obviously some opportunities there for those types of grants if they're applicable. But you know, you can look on our website and see all the grants that Indexa has given over the last at least 25 years. We just celebrated our 40th anniversary last year, and so Indexa has been around for a while. You know, it's a good way to support DXpeditioning, and you know that your money's going to be spent wisely. You know, we do a newsletter. We put out a newsletter. Try to get 4 times a year. We're looking more at 3. We're getting ready to put out our spring edition. Steve Molo, KI4 KWR, is our newsletter editor, and he just sent out a last call for the spring edition. And so we publish articles about the DXpeditions and other interesting news topics in the NDX. But again, if you're not a member of Indexa, I would encourage you to support us. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to email me as well, and I'll be happy to share what I know. Sometimes I don't think I know much, but I'll give you my best shot. How's that? Anyway, anything
Thank you,
else?
Hal.
Anything else?
You're a great ambassador for Indexa. You do a really good job.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Good. Well, again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and if you know, if I can shed any light on anything for anybody, I'll be more than happy to do that. But
thanks, Hal. It was a fantastic presentation, and not just because you focused on Ireland and I'm Irish, but the whole gamut. And it was an extremely enjoyable presentation, well prepared. And thank you so much for being here tonight with us and for everything you've done for DXing. So
thank you. I appreciate that, Kevin.
Everyone have a good evening.
Yes, sir.